The night air carried a bite, the kind of chill that settled in the bones long before the calendar admitted winter had come. Grayford General, a small brick hospital set on the edge of a dying rural town, was usually quiet after midnight, a place of muffled beeps, hushed footsteps, and exhausted nurses staring into half-empty coffee cups. But on that night, the silence broke with the sound of claws dragging across the glass doors. A wounded German shepherd, its fur matted dark with blood, staggered forward and scratched again and again until the automatic doors hissed open. What followed left everyone inside questioning far more than how the dog had gotten there. If stories like this hold you, if you find yourself drawn to the quiet dread between the lines, stay with me. There will always be more. Nurse Emily Harrow had just finished her rounds when she heard it. A low, guttural sound, not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. She turned her head toward the lobby doors, frowning. For a moment she thought it might be the wind, pushing leaves against the glass. But then it came again, claws scraping in short, desperate bursts. She moved closer, her sneakers whispering against the linoleum, and froze when she saw the shepherd. Its right flank was torn open, fur clotted in a sticky mess that gleamed under the weak fluorescent lights. Its eyes, dark, pleading, glazed with exhaustion, fixed on her through the glass. "Jesus," Emily whispered. The door slid open with their usual indifferent hiss, and the dog stumbled inside, leaving a thin trail of blood across the tile. Emily's first instinct was to run for help, but something in the shepherd's stance stopped her. It wasn't aggressive. If anything, it looked purposeful, as though it had come here for a reason. "Emily?" Dr. Marcus Lane's voice broke the silence. He stepped into the lobby, rubbing tired eyes, white coat unbuttoned. He had been on his third consecutive night shift, the kind that left him gruff and half-broken. "There's a dog," Emily said, pointing. Marcus followed her gaze, and for a brief second, something unreadable flickered across his face. Not surprise, not quite, something closer to recognition. The shepherd collapsed. Its body hit the floor with a dull thud that seemed to echo too loudly in the empty lobby. Emily dropped to her knees without thinking, her hands hovering over the animal's torn side. "It's bad," she said. "Real bad." Marcus crouched down, running a practiced eye over the wounds. "Knife," he muttered. "That wasn't an accident. Someone did this." Emily looked at him sharply. "You're sure?" "Clean cut edges. No tearing like a trap or wire would cause." The shepherd let out a weak whine, lifting its head as if to make sure they were listening. Then, slowly, painfully, it dragged one paw forward, scraping toward the hallway, toward the patient wings. Emily blinked. "It wants to go somewhere." Marcus straightened, jaw tight. Or to someone. They moved the dog into a small treatment room. Emily fed supplies while Marcus set up a quick four-line. The shepherd fought to stay conscious, its body trembling as though Shiro alone kept it alive. As Emily cleaned the wounds, she noticed something unusual. A thin collar buried in the dog's blood-matted fur, half hidden. The leather was scuffed, but the metal tag was intact. She wiped it clean. One word was etched into the steel. "Ranger." Emily frowned. "Ranger. You think he's local?" Marcus didn't answer. His face had gone pale, his hands oddly stiff for a man who had stitched bullet wounds without flinching. "What is it?" she pressed. Marcus hesitated, then said quietly, "That's Sheriff Collier's dog." Emily froze. Sheriff Collier, the most feared man in Grayford County, a lawman with a smile that never reached his eyes, who had ruled the town for years with favors and threats. Secrets buried deep in the minds that once kept the place alive. But why would his dog show up here? Like this? Marcus didn't reply. He just kept working, his jaw grinding. By the time Ranger was stable, the hospital had shifted into its strange nocturnal rhythm again. The hallways hummed with faint fluorescent buzz, distant voices, the occasional rattle of a gurney wheel. But beneath it all, something had changed. Emily could feel it, a tension in the air, like the town itself was holding its breath. When she stepped out to dispose of bloody gauze, she found Marcus leaning against the wall, staring at nothing. "You knew him," Emily said softly. Marcus glanced at her, the look in his eyes sharp, warning. "Drop it." But she didn't. She couldn't. If Collier's dog came here, hurt like that, it means something. You know it does. Marcus's silence was louder than any answer. It was nearly 2 a.m. when the first knock came at the hospital's side door. Sharp, deliberate, not the frantic pounding of someone in distress, but the steady rhythm of a man who knew he would be answered. Emily and Marcus exchanged a glance. "You expecting anyone?" she asked. He shook his head. The knock came again. Emily's stomach tightened. She thought of Ranger lying in the treatment room, bandaged and weak, of the way the dog had dragged itself through the doors, determined to reach them, not the sheriff. Them. Marcus's voice was low, rough. "Stay here." But she didn't. She followed him, footsteps quiet, until they reached the side entrance. Marcus unlocked the door and pulled it open an inch. Cold air rushed in, carried with it the smell of wet leaves and diesel. On the other side stood Sheriff Collier. His uniform was neat, his hat pulled low, but his eyes, pale and flat, slid past Marcus, past Emily, toward the faint sound of the German shepherd's labored breathing down the hall. "Evening, Doc," Collier said. His voice was smooth, steady, almost polite. "Heard you had a visitor." Marcus didn't answer. Emily felt the weight of the moment press down on her, a heaviness that warned her to stay still, say nothing. Collier's mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. "Why don't you let me in? We can talk about my dog." The shepherd stirred then, as if sensing the sheriff's presence, a weak growl rattling in his throat. Emily's pulse spiked. Something about that sound, about the timing of it, made the truth coil sharp in her chest. Ranger hadn't come to them by accident. He had come for help. He had come to get away. And the one thing Emily suddenly knew with a bone-deep certainty was this. Sheriff Collier was not here to save him. The side door creaked wider under Sheriff Collier's hand, his boots planted firmly on the threshold like he already owned the place. The night air slipped in with him, heavy with the smell of wood smoke from the hills. His pale eyes cut past Marcus and Emily, narrowing as if he could already smell the wounded animal. "You've got my dog," he said softly. No pleasantries, no hesitation. Just fact. Emily's throat went dry. Marcus stepped forward, blocking the sheriff's view of the hallway. "He's in bad shape," Marcus said. "He needs rest." Collier tilted his head, studying Marcus with that same faint curve of his mouth. Not amusement, not warmth. Something harder. "And I aim to give him rest. Document. Why don't you show me where he is?" Emily felt the tension stretch tight between the two men. She wanted to speak, to push the door shut, to protect the dog whose blood still stained her hands. But Marcus's jaw was set, his body angled just enough to shield her. Finally, Marcus said, "He's stable. That's all you need to know tonight." The sheriff's eyes sharpened. He leaned just a fraction closer. "Stable," he repeated. "You patched him up. After I told the county loud and clear, nobody treats what's mine without me knowing." Emily stiffened. "What's mine?" The words crawled across her skin like ants. Marcus's voice was even. "He showed up bleeding out on our doorstep. You'd have left him to die." Collier's smile widened, a thin, bloodless baring of teeth. "A dog learns loyalty when you let him bleed a little." For the first time, Emily understood why Ranger had dragged himself here, why he'd chosen the hospital over anywhere else. When Collier finally stepped inside, his boots echoed against the tile like a metronome marking the seconds of borrowed time. Emily trailed behind Marcus, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. The treatment room door was cracked open. Ranger lay inside, ribs rising shallowly, one paw twitching against the floor. His head lifted weakly when the sheriff entered. The growl that rumbled out of the dog's throat was thin, ragged, but unmistakable. Emily swore she saw a flicker cross Collier's face. Annoyance, maybe, or something colder. But he crouched down, resting his hat on one knee, and spoke in a voice almost tender. "There you are, boy. Caused me a whole mess of trouble tonight." Ranger's lips pulled back, a flash of yellow teeth. His growl deepened, startling for a dog, so close to collapse. Emily's stomach lurched. Dogs didn't lie. They didn't fake hatred, not like humans did. Collier stood, brushing dust from his coat. "Well, he said, glancing at Marcus. "I'll be taking him now." "No." The word left Marcus's mouth before Emily could process it. The sheriff froze. Slowly, his gaze slid back to Marcus, cold and flat as a knife laid on a table. "What was that?" Marcus's hands curled into fists at his sides. "He's not strong enough to move. You drag him out of here now, you'll kill him. That's on you." Collier stepped closer, his shadow cutting Marcus in half. "You forgetting who runs this town, Doc?" Marcus didn't flinch. "You've already forgotten the dog doesn't want to go with you." The words hung heavy in the sterile air. Emily's chest constricted. She wanted to drag Marcus back, to stop him before the sheriff's temper snapped. But Collier only chuckled, low and humorless. "You've grown a spine since I last saw you. Shame if it broke." Later, when Collier finally left, his boots clicking away into the night with the threat of his return hanging like smoke, Emily exhaled shakily. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. "You're insane," she whispered to Marcus. "Standing up to him like that? Do you know what he's capable of?" Marcus's face was pale, damp with sweat. "More than you do." Something in his tone made Emily's skin prickle. She studied him, suddenly aware that Marcus hadn't just recognized Ranger's name earlier. He'd known it too well. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked. Marcus didn't meet her eyes. He busied himself with the 4-line, adjusting the drip, though his hands shook. "Leave it, Emily." "No," she said louder this time. "You've been hiding something since the second you saw that dog. What is it?" Marcus's had snapped up, eyes flashing. For a moment, Emily thought he might finally say it. The truth coiled tight behind his teeth. But then he looked at Ranger, at the stitched wound along the shepherd's flank, and something closed off inside him. "You don't want to know," he said flatly. The hours stretched thin. Emily sat beside Ranger, listening to his labored breathing. Each time the door creaked or a floorboard groaned, her heart jumped, expecting Collier's shadow to fill the frame again. But the sheriff didn't return that night. Instead, just after dawn, a different visitor arrived. The hospital's front door slid open, and a woman hurried in. Long coat buttoned to her throat, scarf pulled high. Her face was pale, hair unkempt, as if she'd been driving all night. She looked out of place in Grayford, too polished for the town's worn edges. Emily stepped forward cautiously. "Ma'am, can I help you?" The woman's eyes darted past her. "I need to see Marcus Lane." Emily's stomach clenched. "You know him?" "I'm his sister." Emily blinked. She hadn't even known Marcus had a family nearby. He never spoke of them. The woman spotted him emerging from the treatment room, fatigue etched deep in his face. Her shoulders sagged with relief. "Marcus," she whispered. His reaction was a relief. It was anger. "Clara, what the hell are you doing here?" "I heard," she said breathlessly. "About the dog. About Collier. You think he doesn't know already? You're in danger." Emily's heart thudded. She knew about Ranger, too. Marcus grabbed Clara's arm, steering her toward a quiet corner. Their voices dropped low, but Emily caught enough to piece threads together. Words like debt and cover-up and the mines. Her skin went cold. Ranger stirred weakly, a faint whine escaping his throat. Emily looked back at him, then at Marcus and Clara whispering harshly in the hall. Whatever secret Marcus was carrying, it was tangled with Collier, with the town, and with his battered shepherd who had dragged himself across miles to die at their door. And when Clara's voice finally rose above the whisper, Emily felt the blood drain from her face. "If you don't tell her," Clara snapped, "I will." Emily's pulse roared in her ears. She didn't know what truth Clara wanted exposed, but she knew two things with certainty. Sheriff Collier would be back. And whatever Marcus was hiding, it was the reason Ranger had come here. Her hand brushed the shepherd's paw, cold beneath her fingers. "Hang on, boy," she whispered. "You didn't crawl here for nothing." But even as she said it, she wondered if she could trust a man stitching his wounds, or the woman who claimed to be saving them both. The second night fell heavier than the first, dragging Grayford under a blanket of damp fog and silence. The hospital's lights glowed like tired eyes against the dark. Emily sat awake in the treatment room, her back aching, Ranger's shallow breathing the only sound keeping her tethered. Marcus and Clara had vanished into the physician's office hours ago, their hushed voices spilling in fragments whenever the door cracked. Emily didn't need to hear every word to know the truth. Between them wasn't something she was supposed to know, but she wanted it anyway. Ranger stirred, his paw twitching. His eyes opened, cloudy but alert, and for a moment Emily swore he was trying to tell her something. His gaze shifted to the hallway, to the shadows beyond the door. Then a low growl rose in his throat, quiet but deliberate. Emily followed his stare. The hairs on her neck prickled. The side door creaked. Sheriff Collier entered without ceremony, hat tucked under one arm, boots leaving a trail of damp prints across the floor. He didn't bother to knock this time. Emily's breath caught. She reached for the four-pole like it might serve as a weapon. "Evening again," Collier said softly. His tone was smooth, but the edges cut sharp. His eyes moved past her, locking on Ranger. The growl deepened, vibrating through the dog's chest. "Still fighting," the sheriff murmured. "Good. Means he remembers." Marcus appeared in the hall, Clara right behind him, his face drained of color. "Ray, you can't be here." Collier's smile spread, thin and false. "I could be anywhere I damn please. You of all people should know that." Emily looked between them. "What does he mean, Marcus?" Silence. Clara broke it. "Tell her, or I swear to God I will." Marcus's shoulders sagged as if the weight he'd been carrying finally crushed him. His eyes met Emily's, haunted. 6 years ago, he began, voice raw. There was an accident in the mines. Only it wasn't an accident. Collier ordered a section collapsed, trapped 5 men inside. Emily's stomach lurched. "Why?" "Because they knew," Clara said fiercely. "They'd found proof. Collier was running contraband through the shafts. Guns, cash, drugs, all of it buried under rock and earth." Emily's breath hitched. "You knew?" Marcus's silence was the answer. Collier chuckled, low and cruel. "Doc here was supposed to sign the reports. Say the men were drunk. Say it was their fault. He did a fine job, too. Never wavered once." Emily's chest constricted. She looked at Marcus. Kind, steady Marcus. And all she saw was a stranger. "I had no choice," Marcus whispered. "He would have." Collier cut him off with a laugh. "Spare us. You made your choice, Marcus. You save yourself." Ranger's growl rattled louder. He tried to push himself up, staggering to his feet, despite the stitches tugging at his side. His gaze was locked on the sheriff, unwavering, filled with a hatred that made Emily's throat tighten. Clara's voice sliced the air. "You didn't just betray the man. You betrayed him, too." She pointed at Ranger. "That dog saw everything. He knows what you did." Emily blinked. "What are you talking about?" Clara's eyes burned. "Ranger was there the night the mines went down. He belonged to one of the men Collier killed. And when Marcus signed those lies, when he helped cover it, Ranger knew who betrayed his master." The room tilted. Emily pressed a hand to the counter to steady herself. Marcus shook his head violently. "No, I didn't." But Ranger's snarl erupted, savage and clear, his body trembling with fury. The truth was in his eyes. Collier stepped forward, hand brushing the gun at his hip. "Enough of this." His gaze pinned Marcus. Time to clean up what should have been buried years ago. Emily moved instinctively, placing herself between Ranger and the sheriff. "You'll kill him over your own secrets?" Collier's face was stone. "He was never mine. He's a loose end." The gun cleared the holster. And then Clara screamed, "Now, Marcus!" For a heartbeat, Emily thought Marcus would lunge at the sheriff, stop him. But instead, Marcus stepped back, away from Collier, away from her. Her stomach dropped. Betrayal burned sharp in her chest. "You coward," Clara hissed. "You're still his." Collier smiled, gun steady. "That's better. Some men remember where their loyalties lie." Ranger staggered forward, teeth bared. Emily's heart lurched. The dog couldn't fight in his state, couldn't survive another wound. And then the shot rang out. Emily flinched, bracing for pain, for the collapse of fur and blood at her feet. But when she opened her eyes, Collier was the one on the ground. Clara stood over him, pistol shaking in her hands. Smoke curled from the barrel. Her face was white, her body trembling, but her voice was steady. "You don't own us anymore." Collier's pale eyes widened, mouth opening like he wanted to laugh. Instead, blood filled the space, dark and thick. His body stilled. Silence swallowed the hospital. Ranger collapsed beside Emily, chest heaving, eyes fluttering shut. She dropped to her knees, clutching his head, tears spilling hot down her face. "Stay with me, boy. Please." Marcus stood frozen, face ashen, hands empty. Emily looked up at him, fury blazing through her grief. "You let this happen," she spat. "You let him control you. And now good men are dead because you kept quiet." Marcus's lips parted, but no words came. Emily turned away from him. Dawn broke gray and thin. Sheriff Collier's body lay covered in a sheet. Clara had sunk into a chair, gun limp in her lap, her eyes hollow. Marcus lingered in the hallway, silent, guilt a weight heavier than the fog outside. But Emily stayed with Ranger. His breathing slowed, steadied, stitches holding where blood had once poured. His eyes opened weakly, searching hers. "You're safe now," she whispered, stroking his head. "No one will hurt you again." The shepherd sighed, heavy and tired, and laid his head in her lap. She knew he carried scars deeper than the knife wound, scars carved by betrayal and violence. But he had chosen to crawl through the night, through pain and fear, to reach her, to find a place where truth might still live. And in that quiet, broken dawn, Emily promised him and herself that his suffering would not be wasted. The sheriff was gone. His lies would unravel. The town would finally hear the truth. But it would begin with one dog who refused to be silent. Epilogue. Weeks later, when Grayford gathered in the courthouse to hear the coroner's findings and the mine records unsealed, Emily sat on the steps outside, Ranger resting at her feet. His fur had grown back in patches, scars threading his side like reminders carved into stone. People passed and stared, whispering about the shepherd who had brought down a king. Emily only scratched behind his ears, whispering so only he could hear. "You did it. You showed them." Ranger's tail thumped once against the steps, and for the first time in years, the town exhaled. Not in triumph, not in joy, but in the quiet relief of knowing the truth had finally clawed its way into the light.